Hello, this is Richard Ollie, and I've made this short video to assist students who've not had experience in assignment writing at a postgraduate level, or for those who simply want to update their skills. These assignment writing and journal article writing tips will help you stay on top of what's required. I've called the video Everything You Wanted to Know About Academic Writing But Were Afraid to Ask. Now you can play this video as often as you need to, but I recommend you take some notes that will be available to you when you begin to write those assignment-based assessment items. Regardless of the assignment, adopting these habits will serve you well. Read the assignment carefully as soon as you receive it. Don't put this task off. Reading the assignment at the beginning will save you time, stress, and problems later. An assignment can look pretty straightforward at first, particularly if your academic has provided lots of information. That doesn't mean that it will not take time and effort to complete, and you may even have to learn a new skill to complete the assignment. Check that you've read all the parts of the question. Are there different sub-questions? If necessary, ask the academic who set or will mark the assignment about anything you don't understand. Now, don't hesitate to approach your academic. They're there to help and would prefer to set you straight before you hand the paper in. That's also when you'll find their feedback most useful. Check the marking criteria to determine the importance and the number of words that you'll devote out of the total number of words that are available to the section that you're writing. Obviously, the more marks that are available in that section, the more importance and therefore the greater length of the section. Pay attention. This part tells you what to do when you write the paper. Look for the key verb or verbs in the sentence, and we'll talk more about those very soon. Words like analyze, summarize, or compare direct you to think about your topic in a certain way. Also pay attention to words such as how, what, when, where, and why, because these words specify tasks. So look at the words in the assignment because they will tell you what to look for. There's three types of words that are used when an assignment is set. They can be information words, relation words, or interpretation words. Information words ask you to demonstrate what you know about the subject, such as who, what, when, where, how, and why. Should you be asked to define something, then you're being asked to give the subject's meaning according to someone or something. Sometimes you have to give more than one view on the subject's meaning in order to provide a balance. If you're asked to explain, then you're being asked to give reasons why or examples how something has happened. When you're asked to illustrate, you're being asked to give descriptive examples of the subject and show how each is connected with that subject. Being asked to summarize means to briefly list the important ideas that you've learned about the subject. When you're asked to trace something, you're being asked to outline how something has changed or developed from an earlier time to its current form. And when you're asked to research something, you're being asked to gather evidence-based material, and also grey literature, from outside sources about the subject, often with the implication or requirement that you will analyse what you found. Relation words ask you to demonstrate how things are connected. When you're asked to compare, you're being asked to show how two or more things are similar or are different. Contrasting something means that you're being asked to show how two things are dissimilar. When you're asked to apply, you're being asked to use details that you've been given to demonstrate how an idea, theory, or concept works in a particular situation. When you're being asked the cause, then you're being asked to show how one event or series of events made something else happen. And when you're being asked to relate, you're being asked to show or describe the connection between things. Interpretation words ask you to defend ideas of your own about the subject. Do not see these words as requesting opinion alone unless the assignment question specifically says so, but as requiring opinion that is supported by concrete evidence. Remember examples, principles, definitions, or concepts from class or research and use them in your interpretation. If a question is asking you to assess something, then it's asking you to summarize your opinion of the subject and measure it against something else. When you're being asked to prove or justify, you're being asked to give reasons or examples to demonstrate how or why something is the truth. When you're being asked to evaluate or respond, then state your opinion of the subject as good or bad or some combination of the two, but importantly, always state your reasons and, where possible, give examples. In being asked to support something, then you're being asked to give reasons or evidence for something you believe. Be sure to state clearly what it is that you believe, however. Should you be asked to synthesize something, then you're being asked to put two or more things together that have not been put together in class or in your readings before. Do not just summarize one and then the other and say that they're similar or different. You must provide a reason for putting them together that runs all of the way through the paper. Being asked to analyze means you're being asked to determine how individual parts create or relate to the whole. So figure out how something works, what it might mean, or why it's important. And being asked to argue something means that you're being asked to take a side or defend it with evidence against the other side. There's nothing more practical than sound thinking. No matter what your circumstance or goals, no matter where you are or what problems you face, you are better off if your thinking is skilled. Critical thinking is the disciplined art of ensuring that you use the best thinking you are capable of in any set of circumstances. The general goal of thinking is to determine the lay of the land in the situation that we're in. We all have multiple choices to make. We need the best information to make those choices. And by obtaining the best information, you're demonstrating critical critical thinking. You'll see the graphic on your screen is a verb wheel, and in the center, in the purple area, are the 5 areas that are used in Bloom's taxonomy. Now, Bloom used a taxonomy or hierarchy to show the lowest level of learning to the highest level of learning. So, for instance, Bloom expressed his theory about this in a triangle, with knowledge being the very base of that triangle, and then moving through comprehension, application, analysis to the highest form of learning, which is evaluation. The next outer ring of that wheel applies Bloom's work to the verbs that are used, signaling which domain of learning you're being asked to meet. So, for instance, if you're being asked to, say, draw or label or outline or list, and you'll see those and other words in the orange section of the wheel in the knowledge quadrant, then the green says this is the output that you are expected to do as a student. Whereas if you're being asked to evaluate the highest form of learning, the verbs in the orange section will be quite different, and the output or the product that you produce as a student will be different again, such as writing an editorial or concluding something or recommending something. So use the wheel to say, what does my work look like if I'm being asked my knowledge on something? Or what does my work look like if I'm being asked to evaluate something? And the orange area in the middle are the verbs that would be used in the question that will give you an idea of the level of thinking and your level of output. This is a very useful diagram, and I would suggest that you take some time to look at this in some detail, and I've provided the URL so that you can see this for yourself. Now, academic papers are built on 4 elements, and you can see those 4 elements on your screen: of relevance, structure, accuracy, and style. An academic paper, including peer-reviewed journal articles, require careful planning and thought. Each piece of academic writing is built on those 4 elements. Relevance and structure are most efficiently addressed while brainstorming your paper and developing an outline. But style and accuracy are best improved while revising your paper. So let's look at this in some more detail. When it comes to relevance, think about the content first. What is relevant? Have you really thought about your results and discussed them with co-authors, colleagues, your academics, or peers? What's your hypothesis? How do your results add to the existing body of knowledge? And what are the broader implications of that? Brainstorming is the key step to writing a good academic paper, as opposed to a mediocre report, because the burden of proof lies with you, not the reader. Simply disclosing all of your results and methods in excruciating detail is not enough. Your value-added benefit lies in the conclusions that you draw from your results, and your academic supervisors or journal editors will want to know what new knowledge your paper is bringing to this scientific field. That denotes relevance of your work. In terms of structure, the structure of your academic paper is very, very important. When thinking about how to structure your academic paper, always use a style guide or marking guide which is usually available to you and will help you format the structure of the paper. Often, if your style of paper is incorrect, it will detract from your marks on an assignment and may mean the difference between being published or not published if you're writing a journal article. Now, as a general rule of thumb, if there's a word limit, and there usually is, it's usual to devote 10% of the word limit to the introduction and 10% of the word limit to the conclusion. This allows 80% of the words available to you to be used in the body of the assignment. For an academic paper that's to be marked, pay very close attention to the marking guide. The marking guide will give you a lot of information about what the examiner is looking for when they read your paper. Most marking guides will contain the portion of the marks that's been allocated, and this is easily the best guide as to how many words to devote to each section. When you've done that, write a draft structure. Just simple headings and bullet points. Having a set of key or bullet pointed list or outline provides all the key points you want to include in each section of your paper in a logical order, so it reads well as if you are presenting the information or telling a story to your colleagues. Use this to discuss your assignment plans with your tutor. Any draft structure or assignment that you want to discuss with your academic should be no longer than 2 pages. It should only include headings and key points in each sentence, not full sentences. Don't expect your academic to mark your assignment twice, because you're likely to be disappointed. Most academics are more than happy to discuss an outline or a draft structure of your paper that you're going to submit, but the writing of the paper is really up to you. For each section, think carefully about each claim and what evidence you need to back up these claims. And we'll talk about evidence-based literature later on in this video. Don't copy and paste and then edit internet sources. It's glaringly obvious when you do that and could lead to concerns being raised about your academic integrity. For each section, think about the claims that are being made and what evidence you need to back this up, and use the library and database search functions as well as course resources and keep records of the evidence you use for referencing later. Make sure you keep a list of all references you use when you write, and it's always a good practice to list 2 or more points about the limitations of that evidence and a reflection of how they relate to your paper. Do this for each section that you're going to write on, and next to each claim, write a sentence that summarizes the evidence and the reference. Now, in the structure of the paper, most people start sitting down to write an introduction. It's really important to start your introduction to your assignment by writing this clear introduction, but how do you know what you're going to write until you've written it? So it's my recommendation that you leave the recommendation alone until such time as you've written the body of the assignment. The introduction contains general information, such as backgrounds or definitions. It contains a statement of the purpose of the paper, and importantly, it tells the reader the scope of that paper and its structure. As I've said before, the introduction is usually about 10% of the word limit, and really never try to write that first. If you haven't written the body and the conclusion, how can you introduce what you haven't written? And these 3 stages will help you formulate that 10% of your word limit. The introduction ends with the most specific information, a guide to scope and structure of your paper. The main body of your paper follows a predictable template like a method, results, and discussion stages of a report in the sciences, and you often don't need to include a guide to that structure in the introduction unless you're going to do something divergent. In terms of the body of the assignment, start with an outline. The structure of the main body of the assignment is dictated by at least 2 factors. The title and wording of the assignment, whether it's your own or negotiated with your academic, or one that's been given to you. And secondly, the statement of intent that you write in the introduction based on the title. Once you've dealt with the above 2 elements, the main body of the assignment serves to do at least 2 things: to demonstrate or show your knowledge of the topic by including relevant evidence, and to analyze or evaluate the evidence that you've gathered. The material you'll use will usually be grouped into broad categories or assignment sections. That's to say, it's strategically organized. Sometimes the broad categories are indicated by subtitles, as in published research. At this point, it's important not to mix up the sections. For example, new results should be introduced late in the discussion. If you have any other questions that you forgot to mention in the discussion area, make sure these do not appear in the conclusion. Don't simply repeat information in different sections. For example, don't recapitulate results in the discussion. Discuss the results themselves in the appropriate section. And don't simply repeat the information in figures and tables in the texts. It's far better to write an analysis of that information so the reader can either agree or disagree with your analysis. Make sure that each section leads logically to the next. Don't forget to use transition words and phrases to help the reader do this. And ensure that there's continuity of ideas both between paragraphs and within a paragraph, so the reader is able to follow your train of thought or argument easily. As a general rule, discuss each main point of your assignment in a different paragraph. Now, some other advice. When we see bullets and numbering, we see that you have summarized something. But paragraphs are preferred to bullets and numbering in academic writing, and this will allow you to discuss each point further. Bullet points are great for presentations, such as I'm doing here, but I'm giving you more information than just the bullet point that you read on the screen. And that's pretty much how it goes in a written assignment. Unless the assignment tells you to write bullet points, write paragraphs. In relation to the use of I and you, avoid them in academic writing. Academic writing is impersonal, so using I and you in your assignment goes against that impersonal approach, that objective approach that you're trying to achieve in the assignment. Try to build your argument by including evidence and opinions from different sources and different perspectives so that you present a clear, unbiased picture. If you want to include your opinion, then do so indirectly. For example, include your opinion by saying something like, "In my opinion, implementing such an intervention is difficult because," instead of saying something like, "I think implementing an intervention is difficult." Use examples. It is vital that your assignments reflect that you have a clear understanding of a particular topic which has been gained from multiple sources, and that you are able to identify weaknesses and strengths objectively. You must show that you are able to apply this knowledge practically. Including examples in your assignment is a useful way to determine all of the above. Where possible, explain the inferences that can be drawn from included statistics or figures or tables, and discuss the relevance of them. If you're including tables and figures, they can effectively convey information to the reader without affecting your word count, but don't include any more than 2 of these. Also, clearly signpost the reader to each table or figure from the appropriate part of the main assignment, and include clear headings for each table or figure, and clearly mention both the source with the figure and table, and make sure it's in the bibliography. With regard to word count, ensure that the word count of your assignments are not far below or far above the suggested word count. As mentioned earlier, drawing up an outline can help you avoid both of these situations. When it comes to style, make sure that you keep your paragraphs reasonable. In other words, each sentence should be based on one idea, and each sentence in the paragraph should be related to that idea. One way of doing this is to start a topic sentence followed by evidence that supports your topic, so that it starts your topic sentence, which is your main claim in the paragraph, any supporting detail that you want to put in there, 1, 2, or 3 pieces of evidence to support that main topic sentence, and then move to the next idea and repeat that throughout the assignment. For goodness sake, use simple sentences. Many students fall into the trap of making their sentence construction and language overly flowery and complicated. This reduces the readability of your assignment and also causes the reader to look more closely at each of the words that's written in order to understand what you are attempting to communicate. By using more simple sentences, you will minimize the number of mistakes. Your ideas will not sound any less complex. In fact, often it will demonstrate mastery of your topic. And finally, any international audience will also understand you better. Make sure you know your terminology and that you share this terminology with your reader. A misuse of terminology will surely call the rest of your results of writing into question, and remember to use the correct verb tense. So if you're writing in the present tense, all of your verbs should be present tense. If you're writing in the future, all your verbs should be future orientated. And if you're writing about the past, all your verbs should be past orientated. In relation to accuracy, in many cases you are the only one that can check the accuracy of your data, and always do this with fresh, focused eyes. You'd be surprised how many people make this kind of mistake. Now, when we come to the conclusion, this is your final chance to impress the reader, so make it powerful. Most conclusions include three main parts: stating the aim or context of the assignment again, then follow with a very brief summary of the main points, and then finally comment considering the future. The conclusion is closely related to the introduction. It's often described as a mirror image of the introduction. That is, where the introduction begins with general information and ends with specific, the conclusion moves in the opposite direction and starts with the specific and ends with the general. It often begins by summarizing very briefly the main structure or scope of the paper. And of course, this is not necessary if the paper follows a very predictable structure, such as methods, results, and discussions. The conclusion then confirms the topic that was given in the introduction. And depending upon what type of paper you're writing, this may take the form of the aims of the paper, or a thesis statement, meaning your point of view, or a research question or hypothesis and its answer or outcome. The conclusion usually ends with a more general statement about how this topic relates to its context. This may take the form of an evaluation of the importance of the topic, the implications for future research, or a recommendation about theory or practice. Now, a quick word about referencing. At Griffith, we use the APA 6 format. The style guide requires that. So make sure that you understand what referencing style is required for your paper. If you're writing for a journal, they may require a different referencing system. So you have to be able to be flexible to move all around that. So we'll stick to APA 6 because that's the style guide requirement for Griffith University. Reference all citations in their correct format, including web pages and any reports. Now, there's a great tutorial about citing the work of others and referencing, and it's available on the student portal in Library Services. But in APA 6, we start with the author's surname followed by first initial, and then we complete all other authors that are credited with that work. The next is the date that that article was published. A very important piece of information because it tells you how contemporary that reading is. The next is the article title, starting with a capital after the full stop or the semicolon, but in sentence case for the remainder. Now, this has been made into a two-line hard return so that it separates it so you can understand it, but you would single space this with a double space between each reference. And notice the indent on the second end if there were other subsequent lines. The next is the journal of the title, and followed by the volume with the issue number where that's present in brackets. Page numbers are the pages that the article commences and finishes on, and finally the DOI, which is the unique identifier for this particular journal article. And it's very easy to search on DOIs. Now, you also need to use an evidence-based approach to writing. And evidence-based approaches still appear to be one of the most useful ways of getting more critically evaluated evidence into the decision-making process as to what you will use in support of your work. Some tips on evidence-based approaches is reread the question. You may find it helpful to rewrite the question in your own words so that you understand it. Check that you have read all of the parts of the question and whether or not there are different sub-questions that you need to address. Check the marking criteria and make sure that you're writing to satisfy the marking criteria. Make a bullet point list of all key points that you want to include in that section and think about the order of those points. For each point, be able to state what is the claim, the statement which explains the information or knowledge that you believe to be correct, and think about how you know that that claim is correct. Or is it anecdotal evidence based on a personal experience working in the community or a health service, or based on experience as a community member seeing the behaviours of others? Is it your opinion? And if it is, do others have the same or different opinion? Is it something that is yet to be researched? And if it is, why do you think it hasn't been researched as yet? Why might it be difficult to collect data on the subject? Is it a controversial topic? Is it hard to get that information, and why? Is it based on something that you've read? And do you know if there's any published evidence on that topic in your country or in other countries? Think about what evidence you would use to back up your claim. Choose your information sources critically. When reviewing information, whether it's published or unpublished information, it's important to be critical about the quality of the information and remind yourself that all sources of data have limitations. It's always possible to improve and refine and to consider how it might be biased by asking yourself, how was the information collected? Where and when, and whether or not there could be any errors in this process? Was it a robust method? How might those errors impact on the quality of the data? What population did they do the study on? Is it the same or different to the population you're discussing? Who produced the information? Is there any conflict of interests? And finally, depending upon how the information was collected and who collected it, we might value it in a different way. When you read an article, write 3 sentences that summarize the key findings and whether or not there are other articles that have similar or different findings when looking at it from a different perspective, and summarize the key limitations. Think about the completeness of data collection. Did they use a robust method? Did they think about things or reflect on how the context of the research is different to the context in your particular location? Each time you find an article you want to include in your assignment, then add it to your list of references. Remember that academics can clearly see and are not fooled by those who spend more time on the cover page than the essay, that have great graphics and cool binders and cute titles, but these are no replacement for a well-written paper. Don't use huge fonts or wide margins or extra spacing to pad the page length. These tricks are immediately obvious to the eye. Most academics use the same word processor you do, so they can tell how many words are in there. They know what's possible. And such tactics are especially damning when the academic has a stack of more than 60 papers to grade and yours are the only one that could be seen from a low-flying airplane. Don't use a paper from another class that covered sort of similar material. Again, the instructor has a particular task for you to fulfill in the assignment, and it usually relates to course materials and lectures. Your other paper may not cover this material, and turning in the same paper for more than one course may result in you having to explain why this is not academic misconduct. Don't get overly creative before you answer the question. Showing that you're able to think beyond the boundaries of a simple assignment can be good, but you must do what the assignment calls for first. Again, check with your academic. A humorous tone can be refreshing for somebody who's marking a stack of papers, but it'll not get you a good grade if you've not fulfilled the task. Critical reading of assignments leads to skills in other types of reading as well, and if you get good at figuring out what the real goals of the assignments are, you're going to be better at understanding the goals of all of your classes and fields of study. And finally, use only material that is yours. And if the material is not your own, then credit it in the referencing for those whose material it is. So before you submit your final work, check that there's a word count and that you have satisfied it. Make sure that you can clearly see a good title, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And answer every question and sub-question, and be able to identify where that is answered in the assignment. A source of evidence for every claim is a good practice. Reread your text and underline all of your claims and make sure that you've got evidence for each of them. Make sure that all figures and tables have a reference. Reference each piece of evidence, whether that be articles, websites, opinions, newspapers, journal articles, and so on. It should be clear in the text what are your own thoughts and what are those of another person. A reflection about the quality of each evidence source and how this evidence might apply to your country is very good. List references at the end of the assignment that match inline citation in that assignment, and make sure that you are plagiarism free. Direct copying and pasting of other people's work that you did not write is academic misconduct and is frowned upon, and can mean the difference between passing a course or failing it. And to ensure that this has happened, always use the Safe Assign draft portal to get a similarity report back before you lodge in the final. I hope this has been of help to you, and thanks for listening.